Happy holidays, everybody. I'm Joshua Orro, the Mustang Prince. And welcome to Mustang Prince Orro Reports. Well, folks, it's the moment we've all been waiting for. The third and final blog I'm making for the Christmas season. But first, let's have a little background info before we get into the main subject. On December 19th, 1843, English novelist Charles Dickens published a classic book called A Christmas Carol. It told the story of a greedy old man named Ebenezer Scrooge who values money over human life. On Christmas Eve, he's visited by the spirit of his deceased partner, Jacob Marley, who died 7 years prior. Jacob warns him that if he doesn't change his ways, he'll be cursed to bear heavy chains in the afterlife. Afterwards, he's visited by 3 ghosts of Christmas, so they'll show him the light in order to change his ways. Now, over the years, there have been many different adaptations of this classic story, from TV specials, plays, and films. This story is also a tradition for my friends and family at Musical Theater Village in Irvine, California. In fact, this Christmas just so happens to be my 10th year performing with them. Now, if you may recall 2 years ago, when I made my top 25 holiday films, I put Disney's Christmas Carol from 2009 at number 1. And to this day, I still enjoy the movie, despite the fact that Image Movers Digital is gone forever, after that disappointing Martian failure that came afterwards. However, just several months ago, my Musical Theater Village friends asked me to blog their favorite version of Christmas Carol, which was put together by Jim Henson Productions with some help from the Walt Disney Company. So, without further ado, released on December 11th, 1992, the movie is The Muppet Christmas Carol. Now, in this movie, the Muppets perform the classic Dickens holiday tale, with Kermit the Frog, the stingy Ebenezer Scrooge, and other Muppets like Miss Piggy, Gonzo the Great, Fozzie Bear, and Sam Eagle. Scrooge receives visits from the spirits of Christmas past, present, and future. They show him the error of his self-serving ways, but the miserable old man seems he passed any hope of redemption and happiness. So, what are my thoughts on this movie? Well, while A Christmas Carol from 2009 may be my number 1 holiday film, The Muppet Christmas Carol is my absolute favorite film out of any Christmas Carol adaptation that's ever been made. But in order to explain more information, let's move on to Mustang notes. Now, The Muppet Christmas Carol was one of the ideas by Jim Henson shortly after the Muppets joined Disney, and was directed by his son Brian Henson. Taking over the puppeteering of Kermit the Frog, originally performed by Jim Henson before his death in 1990, was Steve Whitmire. The movie was shot in Shepperton Studios, England, and Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. Despite the use of Muppets throughout the filming and a humorous spin on much of the story, this film is a fairly close adaptation of the original story. The story properly is interspersed with scenes of a narrator who, along with the characters, recites many of Dickens' original works. There are also many differences between this movie and the book, some of which I may talk about later, but there are some things I should mention. For example, Scrooge's sister Fan isn't shown in this film, and the human forms of want and ignorance, shown as hideous, animalistic children in the novel, are absent too. Richard Hunt could not perform any of the Muppets because he had, contracted AIDS. He died a year before the film's release. How sad, though. Also, this is the first Muppet film in which the story revolves around characters played by human beings, specifically Ebenezer Scrooge. The rest of the cast consists of mostly Muppet performers. Several pivotal roles, in particular the 3 spirits of Christmas, were portrayed by specially created Muppets, it was at one time considered that well-known Muppets would be cast in these roles before it was ever decided that it would detract from the ominous effects the spirits would need to convey. Now, what else is there to mention? Well, other than the fact that this is a classic Muppet film, despite the fact that I haven't watched any of the Muppet TV shows back in the old days of my childhood. I mean, I was only 2 when this film came out. The first time I ever watched the Muppets on TV, with the exception of Sesame Street, was watching Muppets Tonight and Labyrinth on Disney Channel, and a few years later, Bear in the Big Blue House on Playhouse Disney. Also, this movie does contain classic Muppet comedy, and there are some scary moments in this too, which is what I think Charles Dickens would like about this. And it's also pretty similar to most Christmas Carol films. I also need to mention that this version of London Town is pretty similar, but a little different compared to the London my family and I visited back in summer 2010. And this wouldn't be a Muppet film without wonderful songs in it. For example, the opening song, Scrooge, sung by all the Muppets in London, does great build-up to, well, or should I say building up to the greedy old miser. There's also a Good King Wenceslas, but I'm not really sure if folks remember it due to the fact that it's sung pretty fast by a young caroler. Anyway, now let's move on to the characters, their actors, and their songs. Ebenezer Scrooge is played by the great Michael Caine. I don't need to tell you how awesome a guy he is from such films like Zulu, The Italian Job, Jaws 4, and Bewitched. Even films like Romeo and Juliet and Christopher Nolan's Batman films. So some folks hate Cars too. So what? He's still awesome in that film as well. As for his role as Scrooge, well, I believe Caine does a wonderful performance playing a greedy old moneylender who hates Christmas. Also, Caine is a great singer, too. The song he leads in this film is called Thankful Heart. It takes place after Scrooge promises to change his ways. While he sings this song, he spreads tons of Christmas cheer to everyone in London, including his nephew. Speaking of which, next we have Scrooge's nephew, Fred, played by Stephen McIntosh. Now, I need to mention that Fred is one of my favorite Christmas Carol characters, and I have played him a couple times on stage last year and this year as well. In my opinion, McIntosh does a great job playing a young man who loves his uncle and Christmas. He even has a lovely wife named Clara, played by Robin Weaver. And, well, in my opinion, the only thing they're missing is a daughter. What? Don't you think Fred deserves children? Anyway, like most versions, Fred and his friends do play the yes and no game during the present segment. And in my opinion, that is a pretty funny scene. Next we have Scrooge's neglected fiancée, Belle, played by Meredith Braun. In the book, she is Fezziwig's daughter. Here, however, she is a friend of the Fozzie family. She too has a song, When Love Is Gone, which is sung when she breaks up with Scrooge. In my opinion, it's a really touching and sad song. Also, it gets a reprise, not once, but twice. Once, sung by Scrooge, Tiny Tim, and the rest of the cast, and the second time, at the end credits, sung by the beautiful and talented Martine McBride. While I do enjoy the first two versions, I love Martine McBride's version more. I mean, it's just so powerful and emotional. Makes you want to consider Martine McBride as the Celine Dion of country singers. And now it's time to talk about the Muppets in this film. Let's start with Bob Cratchit, played by Kermit the Frog. Now, we all know in the book, Bob is Scrooge's clerk and bookkeeper. However, in this film, Bob isn't Scrooge's only employee. Bob is also accompanied by other bookkeepers, played by a pack of rats. Bob's song is called One More Sleep Till Christmas. Now, this song is sung while he and the bookkeepers are closing up the counting house and walking home. In my eyes, this is a really sweet song. This does give a nice feeling of singing while cleaning up, and it's the kind of song you'd want to listen to on Christmas Eve. My favorite part of this song is when Bob skates at the Penguins' Christmas skating party, and when the rats catapult themselves in order to close the window blinds. It even gets a little reprise while Bob is coming home from church with Tiny Tim. Next we have Miss Piggy playing Bob's wife, Emily Cratchit. In my eyes, Piggy does a great performance playing a woman who doesn't like Scrooge and wants to give him a piece of her mind, and loves her husband and children, Peter, and the twins, Belinda and Bettina. The only child they're missing in this version is the oldest daughter, Martha. Next we have Bob's youngest son, Tiny Tim, played by Kermit's nephew, Robin. I absolutely love Robin's performance playing as a little boy who has a deep love of Christmas, despite the fact that he's crippled and sick. And trust me, those who don't cry while seeing Tiny Tim's death scene is born without a soul. Trust me. Tim gets to lead a song called Bless Us All with his family while they're having Christmas dinner. In my opinion, this is another emotional song. It has, in my opinion, more emotion than Lord's Bright Blessing from the Mr. Magoo Christmas Carol or Tim's song from Scrooge 1970. Next we have Charles Dickens, played by Gonzo the Great, and his friend Rizzo the Rat. These two are my favorite characters in the movie, and the funniest, because while Gonzo narrates the movie, Rizzo does all sorts of funny stuff, like jumping from a gate, being used as a window cleaner, getting his tail on fire, even falling down a chimney and nearly getting his feet burned by goose. Both of them even fall off a horse, crash into trees while holding onto a grappling hook, and get pushed from the windowsill twice. Next up we have Fozzie Bear playing Scrooge's old employer, Fozziewig. Fozzie's performance is very lovable. At his Christmas party, he has the Electric Mayhem and Rob the Dog for music, and the Swedish chef serving side dishes, which are actually alive and singing. Next up is Dr. Bunsen Honeydew and his assistant Beaker playing as charity gentlemen, whom my theater friends and I call Poole and Hackett. Like in the book, they go from door to door asking for donations to buy the poor some meat, drink, food, and warmth. Scrooge refuses, however, but Fred does make a donation with them in this version before he leaves the counting house. Later in the film, Scrooge does make a donation with Honeydew and Beaker, and they do give him a scarf in return. Next we have Sam Eagle playing Scrooge's old headmaster. He appears when Scrooge graduates from school and appoints him as an apprentice to a fine company in London, which I think could be Fezziwig's place, though. We also have Bean Bunny, a little rabbit who's seen caroling in front of Scrooge's office, and has a wreath thrown at him. But later, Scrooge asks him to buy a prize turkey and accompany him to deliver the turkey to the Cratchits. Next up, we have Scrooge's deceased partners, Jacob and Robert Marley, played by Statler and Waldorf. Now, everyone who has ever watched The Muppet Show remembers these guys. They're mostly known for making jokes in the overhead box. Anyway, their performance as the Marley Brothers are mostly silly than scary. I mean, they're silly when they heckle at Scrooge like they do on the show, and they mostly act friendly towards him as well. They don't have many chains on them at first, but more come on them later. Although my theater friends do think that I make a better Marley than them. The scary part that involves them is, of course, the scene where Scrooge sees Jacob's face on the knocker. Makes me wonder what my face would look like on Scrooge's door. Whoa. Anyway, the other scary thing is, well, their song, Marley and Marley. While that song is pretty scary, it's also awesome. It's mostly about the Marleys warning Scrooge about his fate, that if he doesn't change his ways, especially when they're joined by singing coin boxes. But I also gotta say that it's equally as scary as the song I sing as Marley on stage, which is called Draggy Wonder, Drag You Down.
I was just like you. Well, close. Just a penny pinching, clutching, squeezing right up my side. Charity and kindness, merely words I never used. Are these the chains you wish to wear until the end of time? Let me go. Drag you under, drag you down. You drag you under, drag you down. You'll fire burns. Drag you under, drag you down. See the souls you left to me. Drag you under, join us now. You will be our strongest link.
Now let's talk about the three ghosts of Christmas. Let's start with the Ghost of Christmas Past, voiced by Jessica Fox. Now, Paston, well, is an ethereal, childlike spirit. Her effects were created by making a special puppet that was operated in a tank of water, and then green screened into the film to make it look like it was floating. In my opinion, she does resemble a lot to the book's version. In the book, she is described as a being dressed in a white tunic and engulfed in a bright light. Also, in my opinion, she's actually pretty cute. She shows Scrooge's childhood at school, his graduation day, Christmas at Fozzie Wigs, meeting Belle, and the scene where they break up. Next up is the Ghost of Christmas Present, played by the late Jerry Nelson. In the film, the Ghost of Christmas Present is a giant Muppet who's jolly and cheerful, which is what I love about him, compared to the book counterpart, which was regularly grim and stern to Scrooge. In contrast, this adaptation is unusual in that it presents the Ghost of Christmas Present as aging during the course of his visit, as he does in Dickens' novel. Also, some folks point out that Present is like a mix of Jesus by his design and Santa Claus due to his jolly personality. He shows Scrooge to Fred's party and the Cratchit's Christmas dinner. However, before all that, Present sings his own song, which just happens to be my absolute favorite in this movie. It feels like Christmas. I mean it, folks. This is a really wonderful song that shows tons of Christmas spirit. But while this song is great, there's one thing that I don't really get about this. I mean, how does everyone else join in the song when they can't really see or hear Scrooge or the spirits that he's with? Let's just move on, shall we? And finally, we have the Ghost of Christmas Future, or Yet to Come, played by Don Austin. Now, we all know what this guy is like. A hooded, robed figure with grayish-black hands, but unlike some versions where the spirit shows what's underneath his hood, this one doesn't seem to do that here. As for my role as him from 2010, well, what I had to do was wear all black while strapping the figure on my shoulder like a backpack and wear skeletal gloves. In my opinion, while the future ghost was creepy, I found him to be a tad gentle while showing Scrooge his future. He shows Scrooge 4 pig gentlemen talking about his death and his funeral, Mrs. Dilber and 2 other folks selling Scrooge's old stuff to old Joe, the Cratchits mourning over Tiny Tim's death, and Scrooge's grave. And now it's time to move on to my final words. Overall, The Muppet Christmas Carol is truly a Christmas classic. While there were a couple scary moments and a few changes here and there, it still sticks very closely to Charles Dickens' classic story. It has marvelous sets, great puppeteering, hilarious humor, and classic songs. And everyone from the Muppets to Michael Caine as Scrooge do a great job playing their characters. I also like to think of this film as a Christmas Carol play with humans and Muppets together. I recommend everyone, whether fans of Jim Henson or the Muppets, to watch this, especially during the holidays. I give this film, you know what, since it's Christmas, I'll give it a full 100%, because there's hardly a bad thing in this film, and every moment of it was pure Christmas and Muppet joy. Well, folks, this concludes my 3-part Christmas 2015 special. And it also ends Season 3 of Mustang Prince Orro Reports. Be sure to join me in 2016 for Season 4. So until next time, this is Joshua Orro, the Mustang Prince, saying, Mustang Power. And have a Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and a Happy New Year.